Hi, slightly different setup, I know. I just step into my office. Won't you? I'm in Copenhagen for Fashion Week, which feels very surreal to be at a fashion week, like as an influencer, I guess, and not someone who has to like steam all the shows for all the runways. Because when I used to work as a designer, you know, it's like all hands on deck when it's Fashion Week, and you always get roped into effectively doing grunt work. So this is it feels like exciting and new, but it is still strange, and it's definitely outside my comfort zone, you know, going to a bunch of events with people I don't really know that well, and, you know, networking and all that stuff is really fun. But, you know, I'm a homebody. I like, you know, I think I'm actually quite shy, really. I think I'm like quite, which I think must be funny considering I put my life on the internet, but day to day I am quite like, I don't like the spotlight. Like when I got married, I made all my bridesmaids wear white so that I wasn't the only one in white, and it, you know, all the attention wasn't on me. Anyway, I have some notes because the format of this YouTube, I want to be a bit different. I've been thinking a lot about this platform and what I want it to be, and I really struggle filming I struggle with what it is I want to do in this world and what's the purpose of me as an influencer, because I think there's a lot of space for beautiful aesthetic videos, but that doesn't, and I think that, you know, there's a level of escapism and people are nosy, and it's interesting to see how other people live their lives, but I don't actually like making that content, and I think sometimes it shows, and I think I always want to match up the aesthetic with the reality, and, you know, those two things are very different, and logistically that makes it hard for me to film a video, you know, when those two things are conflicting. So I really just wanted to try something a bit different, and part of me is worried this is going to be a bit academic. Like, I went to uni for 7 years. I wanted to do a deep dive on my experience on Fashion Week and, you know, have quite serious conversations. I don't want this to come off as a dissertation. Anyway, let's just talk about what is going to happen this week. So basically, I just got here. I have a lot of brand things I need to film. I'm going to a show, I have some events, but there's also a lot of talks that happen at Fashion Week that are free and anyone go to them. I've had a lot of students in my DMs being like, how do I get involved in this Fashion Week? If you're one of those people, there are free talks. They're always listed on the Copenhagen Fashion Week website, and then they also advertise them on their Instagram, so follow them. That's a good one to see. But the caliber of people they get at that talks is mind-blowing to me. Like, there's one with Mara Hoffman, who is one of my favorite. She's American designers, who recently shuttered her business because she didn't think how she was operating was going to continue to be sustainable, which I think is such an admirable thing to do, and not many people are willing to put their hands up and say, this isn't sustainable. I just think that's really interesting. So the talk with her I want to go to. And actually that's quite a good segue into what I want to kind of sit down and think about this week, which is Fashion Week to me is kind of the justification of new clothes for a world that doesn't need them. Like, there's enough clothes. I think the stat is we have enough clothes for the next 150 years. So to me, fashion is much more about systems and ideas than the physical clothes anymore. I think, and there's so many different things to dive into here, because it's like, you know, people need to make money, brands need to continue to make money to employ these people. People will still need new clothes because of their lifestyles. Like, I love shopping secondhand. It's an incredibly time-consuming way to get what you need, though. So, you know, a lot of you guys who follow me are parents or really busy working people. Sometimes when you need something, our lifestyle is that you need it now. And until our lifestyles change, and we're not also stretched, I don't foresee our shopping habits changing. Therefore, the sustainability and how we shop fashion, I don't foresee changing. The creative part of fashion is important, and creativity is important. And I'm not sitting here on my high horse as someone who thinks that Fashion Week shouldn't exist. I think it does exist, but it's changing. And that's, I've been hesitant to be involved in Fashion Week for a long time because of that. But I think Copenhagen Fashion Week is a place that really commits to change and putting their money where their mouth is in terms of sustainability, inclusivity, which are obviously all the things that I really stand for. I have so much to say on this, but I'm very conscious of waffling on for ages and ages before I've even gone out and seen anything. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens on the catwalk this week, but also what happens outside that. And Copenhagen Fashion Week is a big place for street style, and to really see where trends are coming and going. I think we're going to see a lot of craft as a trend, which is something that has happened the last couple of seasons. We know that in times of, I don't know how to describe it. What are we calling what's currently happening in the world? In times of crisis, that does not summarize everything that's happening, I'm well aware, but in times of, when we're scared, we crave nostalgia. And I think, especially considering things like AI, a human touch or a hand touch thing feels a lot more precious than maybe it did a couple of years ago. So, things like crochet and patchwork, we've seen that already. That's definitely on the high street now. But I think it's still, craftsmanship is still happening in fashion. And I think that's going to be a trend we'll see this week and will continue on. I think also function as aesthetic is another interesting trend that's kind of bubbled up slowly and is very much, it's definitely still being worn more so by fashion people. Things like almost like ski goggles as glasses, or Salomon trainers, or there's a lot of really interesting outerwear and sports fabrics that have made their way into everyday wear. I think that will definitely continue to trickle down in a bigger way than we've seen, but it'll be interesting to see what else happens. Anyway, I'm going to stop here because this is something I'm really passionate about, and sometimes I just don't feel like I can articulate it in a way that's digestible. And I think ultimately all these things are a conversation. I think I have authority in what I put on the internet, but I'm by no means the be all and end all of this conversation. So I want to really start this conversation with you guys. I want you to comment. I have these conversations in my DMs all the time about polyester usage in garments and what that means for washing, or how can we shop in more sustainable ways. And I just want to kind of make a bigger scene of those conversations that I'm having in private, really. My plan is I'll try and touch base again with you throughout the week, but I think what I'm going to do is absorb everything and then come back next week and summarize in maybe a more concise way. Anyway, I'm really excited to be here. It feels like such a privilege. And yeah, also, how scanty is this room? I'll give you a little tour while I'm here. All right, so I did actually get here very late last night, and it's going to be messy, but when do I show you a place of mine that is clean? Bed, very comfortable, love that. It actually snowed as we landed, so have a look out here. Yeah, this is what we're working with. The weather app said it was -1, feels like -10, and I can confirm that is true. Super cute little room. I love this little setup here. It just feels very Scandi and chic. All my lighting equipment. And then there's a little mini kitchenette, bathroom in here. Hello. Because the world feels like it's on fire, my tap literally fell off the wall, like it's in the sink when I got here. So that needs to be fixed. Other than that, this is an amazing hotel and it's been really nice. I set up all my skincare so that I actually do it, because when I'm traveling, I tend to just, I don't know what happens. I just don't. Little kitchenette, which is a mess. I've put all my suitcases there for now so that they're just out of shot when I'm doing outfit videos. And then this is the view out here, which I think is so cute. Love this little kind of set up here. And yeah. All right, well, I might start getting ready for the first couple of events. Yeah, this is what I've just worn this morning to go have breakfast and get myself organized. But I better go get ready and I will check back in with you all soon.
You stand, do you want us to stand?
Hello, welcome back. I'm back in London, which is nice. I want to start by saying that, and I probably should have said this at the start of when I started filming, but grab yourself a tea. I think you should treat this video as a podcast. Like, put me on in the background, do whatever you need to do, because basically I'm going to be sitting here. I will put up images of what happened or what I'm talking about from Copenhagen Fashion Week, but I think it's effectively going to be a podcast. I mean, if you want to sit and stay for the visual, you're welcome. We are in my wardrobe room. My current process for getting dressed in the morning is that Mac is with me. So I have set up like a little den here in the corner, which is like a pillow and a duvet, and I've got like some books and stuff around, and he kind of just sits here and hangs out. So I thought, like, it looks quite cozy. So I thought, actually, why don't I just sit here? I'm amongst clothes. It makes sense. Anyway, so what might actually be helpful is if you are listening to this as like an audio experience, I will put up a Pinterest board of all the images I'm talking about. So you can refer back to that if you're so inclined. But otherwise, buckle up. As expected, I got quite overwhelmed last week with like jobs that I had to film, things I had to go and see, and just the volume of things. I knew that was going to happen, but normally when I'm at a fashion week, and I have not been to a fashion week for a very long time. I couldn't tell you the last one I went to. 2017, maybe? Anyway, normally when I was going as a buyer, before my life as a designer, I would get the shoppies. Like, I would want to buy stuff. I just wanted to go out and acquire things. That did not happen this week, which I think is that because the fashion was bad? No, I think because my biggest takeaway was that our clothes aren't changing. I don't think we're buying a lot of new things, but I think how we're styling it is different. How that's going to work for the commercial side of fashion, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I do think that says a lot about our social consciousness and how we're approaching sustainability. So I think that was a good thing. I also think it's because there weren't a lot of plus size or mid-size women on the runway or in street style. You know, Copenhagen Fashion Week is very much about the runway and the presentations, and I'm going to get a bit more into that. But street style is a big thing, and it's hard for me to feel inspired when I'm not seeing something on my own body. My other two main takeaways really are that color isn't going anywhere. I think Ranra, which is actually a menswear designer, who I know, I used to share a desk with him when I was studying at the Royal College of Art, did an amazing job on putting colors together in an interesting way. And then for women's wear, hats. Guys, there's a lot of hats happening, which I also think is interesting, and an interesting way to make an existing outfit more interesting. Also, I'm going to be taking, if you're still visually watching this, I'm going to be taking my glasses on and off. It really annoys me that you can see the light reflection in these glasses. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is what is Copenhagen Fashion Week and how is it different from other fashion weeks? Because I think Fashion Week traditionally was a very internal, industry focused event. You know, the focus of it was for buyers to buy collections for the next season. It is still a place of that. However, fashion has now taken on a responsibility, especially at Copenhagen Fashion Week, to have conversations about the future of fashion, about the sustainable nature of the clothing industry outside just what fashion is. Because fashion is, to me, the art of getting dressed, whereas clothing is what we wear every day. So I think it's become much more of an inclusive place of those conversations, which is amazing. And I think Copenhagen has set a precedent for that. And in doing that, it has become a much more outward facing PR piece. You know, I think what you're served on social media is the street style from fashion weeks. I think Copenhagen has become very famous for its street style. I think it's a place where influencers get to play dress up, the buyers do, the journalists do, and everyone gets to have a lot of fun. I saw a lot of people having fun, whereas my experience of other fashion weeks is it can be very serious. And I think that the best part about fashion is it's fun. And to me, obviously, it's about how it makes you feel. And sometimes we lose that essence. So Copenhagen as a place is very important, I think, for, you know, conversations around sustainability. They've really led the charge in setting sustainable standards. So if you're showing at Fashion Week there, you have to meet certain requirements, which I think is an amazing thing to have done. And it's also a place about where the clothes are about wearability. I think, you know, other fashion weeks are about avant-garde and creating newness within a discipline, which is important. Creativity is really important because I think creative thinking is going to help us solve a lot of the issues that we see in fashion, whether it's about sustainability or waste or, you know, inclusivity in terms of sizing. However, Copenhagen's point of view, and the reason it's different, is because it's about fashion you can wear now in fabrics that are, you know, built for purpose. It is about the art, but it is also about the wearability, which for me is so special, really, because I think what you see on the runway is still inspiring and it's interesting, but also you could see yourself wearing it, you know, and I think that's unique. I think Copenhagen has also become renowned for its street style. I think, like I said, it's a place where influencers play dress up, which is fun. And I think you get to see, again, wearability in action. A lot of the trends you see at Copenhagen, you will then see on the streets in other major cities. And it really translates in that trickle down effect, you know, that we always, I think the only way I can ever explain this is in that Devil Wears Prada scene where Miranda's talking about the color cerulean and that trickle down. You know, you see it happens over here and it trickles down. The difference with Copenhagen is that the price point is not $10,000 for a dress. It is more like $500, $700, $200. There's a range of prices there, but they're a lot more accessible. And I think that democratization of fashion is what you see at Copenhagen. And that really resonates with me. When it came to street style, I think we saw a lot of peacocking, a lot of people, you know, amping it up because they knew they were going to be photographed, which I love. That confidence I don't possess, but it is amazing to see. And I do think that's when we get to see that creativity that maybe these journalists, influencers, etc. don't get to do in their day-to-day life. But the two people that really stood out to me because they managed to look like themselves and their everyday style, like true to their everyday style, but in a more, I guess, fashion week way, in maybe a little bit more styled. Maybe they push themselves a little bit further than they would in the outfits I get to see every day on Instagram. Yeah, those two people were April Lockhart. I'll put pictures of her here. I particularly liked this Burberry trench she was wearing. She said it was from the Real. That gave me the shoppies. That I would quite like that trench coat. And then Andrea Chong, I thought, also did a really good job. She just looked so chic all week. A lot of what she was wearing was secondhand, which, you know, again, is very her. But I just thought, to me, of all the, I mean, they were amazing people all week. I think everyone really pulled out all the stops, but these two women, for that reason, stood out the most to me. The next thing I want to talk about are the trends I saw. And like I said, I think there was a lot of texture. There were hats, there was color, but the biggest takeaway to me was in the styling. You know, the biggest trends were styling hacks, really, effectively, with things that you probably already own. And I think that was the core takeaway for me as a fashion week from a sustainable perspective that was applicable to the masses. You know, it wasn't about going to buy a new bag. When I say hats were everywhere, not just one type of hat. There were a lot of pillbox hats, there were a lot of bonnets, there were a lot of scarves tied around your heads. You know, there was a variety of thing within each category that you either probably already have in your house or could repurpose something else to make it look like that. So things like there were a lot of gloves on the street style, like in street style, and on the runway tucked into waist belts. I'm going to say this brand name, I always get it wrong. Skal Studio had it on the runway, and then again Andrea Chong wore it. I saw other girls doing it in a really interesting way, and it's effectively just a pair of gloves tucked into over your waist belt, which leads me to the next thing. Millennials, praise God, waist belts not going anywhere. I didn't see any belts around hips. I just saw a lot of waist belts over coats, over shirts, over jackets to cinch and create like an hourglass shape. The interesting styling thing about that, though, was that people were wearing two belts. So literally just wearing one belt on top of the other. And I think it creates a slightly more cinched waist, but also is something you could just repurpose from belts you already own. So I loved that. I'm definitely going to be doing that. I'm going to have a little bit of a styling session after this to see if the belts I own could do that, or do I need to repurpose it with, you know, do two scarves tied around my waist, or kind of get the inspiration in from something else. Because that was the other thing. It wasn't just leather belts, you know, people were tying scarves around their waist. There were belts on the runway in beads and ropes and shawls and so many different things that honestly weren't necessarily about the item. It was just, it was so effortless in that it could just be something that you grabbed from, you know, an existing wardrobe. And I think that is the amazing part about it, that level of effortless, that kind of, which I guess is probably very Scandinavian in its, you know, facade, really. So yeah, I'll put up two pictures from Opera Sport. They did some belts and some really interesting fabrications, which I thought was really good. But mostly I was seeing like lace belts in street style. And it's something that I kind of, you know, we saw last summer. We saw people, you know, effectively taking inspiration from Southeast Asian cultures, you know, and saris, and tying, you know, saris around the waist, and that kind of, I want to say appropriation, but that trend has continued into different fabrications, which I think is a nice evolution of that. Brooches were another thing I saw that kind of just looked like everyone had repurposed things they already owned. I have a box of brooches that is from my grandma. I thought Lucy Roseford wore this amazing brooch detailed coat, but everyone was wearing a brooch on something, and I think none of those brooches, the point wasn't that you could recognize a brooch. Like, not everyone was wearing the same brooch, but they were all, you know, thrifted pieces, and it was more about how you styled them, whether you were wearing them on your lapel, all over your jacket like Lucy, or, you know, how you're placing them together that made it interesting, which again was so beautiful. The last trend I want to talk about is something that I found quite disappointing, and that was the lack of mid-sized people on the runway. I saw a couple of bumps. I think Opera Sport and Nicholas Skosgard, again, pronunciation, sorry, had 2 pregnant women, and I think that's amazing. Pregnant women need to be represented just like different body types need to be represented. But there was a definite lack of curvy people, which probably didn't help with me feeling a bit like not that interested in the clothes and more interested in the styling, because when I see something on a straight sized person, it isn't inspiring to me. I find it hard as a creative person. I find it hard to visualize what that might look like on me. And I think with a rise in conservative politics, we have seen an unfortunate decline in curvy bodies on the runway. Obviously, I'm not going to get into the discussion about, Monjaro and GLP-1 injections here, but I think those things are all tied together. So I was expecting it. I wasn't expecting to see curvy women everywhere, but I was expecting to see more of it in street style. I wasn't. I think that might be partly because it's winter and it was so cold. It was -1. It felt like -10. It was hard, winter clothes are not so much about the body as summer. So maybe it was that I couldn't tell, that's part of it. But I definitely didn't feel represented as a size. And I think, yeah, that was a shame. I was expecting it, but I'm more disappointed about it than I expected to be. There was one look at Opera Sport that was all white lace on a beautiful curvy body. And I think that's the one item, I'll show a picture here, that I was like, oh my God, if I was getting married, I would wear that. I would be buying that. I'd be seeking that out. I'd be, sending notifications in my calendar for when I hit stores. The disappointing thing about this being Copenhagen Fashion Week, and I'll get into this in the next section when we talk about, because I want to talk about sustainability next, because under the sustainable requirements for Copenhagen Fashion Week has always been a conversation around size inclusivity. They've done a lot of work to try and include different body types. We've seen a retraction in respect for people that don't want to be controlled, whether that's from a human rights perspective or a weight perspective. There's one type of thing for everything, because when people comply, they're easier to control. And I think that the reason I'm so disappointed by this is because fashion struggles. It struggles to make money. It struggles to, my main point really is that it struggles for money. And so if we know the facts and stats are there, if we include different body types and more people buy and are involved in the industry, it would make more money. But the more people we involve, the less exclusive fashion becomes. And I think that's the thing that I've always struggled with fashion. And I have hesitated. I'm effectively an inclusive influencer. I try and speak about things in a way that's relatable, because I want you to feel included in things that perhaps you felt excluded from. That's like my mission as a person. But I think Fashion Week feels exclusive, and I just want to be nice and friendly, and that's not how I met often with the industry. And that's before I was an influencer. That's my experience as a designer, as a buyer, as an editorial person. There's a level of aloof coolness around fashion that I don't understand or care about. And it really annoys me, because the currency of cool is so irrelevant to me. I don't get it. We're all better off if we are nice to each other, if we, as a world, you know what I mean? Anyway, this is going on such a tangent. I get very upset about it, but anyway, there were definitely brands trying, and I don't want to diss everyone. And I understand from a commercial perspective that it is really hard to include different body types in a runway show. I've been there, I've done it. It's like a financial strain. It really is. But I think the numbers are there, that if you have to invest in different body types to see that return, for it to then feed itself. The business of fashion is broken, but there are things we can do to fix it, and we have to at least try. So yeah, in terms of sustainability, Copenhagen Fashion Week has, I think it's 19 requirements that brands have to adhere to even be on the official schedule. And so that means, the official show schedule, brands show off schedule, perhaps smaller brands, but to be involved officially in the week, you have to, and it's things like make sure that the requirements are things like make sure that you are not adding a finish to fabrics for the sake of it. It has to have a functional reason for being there. So it's these small things in a supply chain that affect, how you design, how you make, how you finish, because all those things have a sustainable footprint in the end use of the garment. So it's like really thinking about the whole process. I won't get into the 19 different things, but I'll put a link below, baby. Because it is really interesting, and I think it set a precedent for how a lot of other fashion weeks work. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of this like sustainability element of the fashion week is that I think sometimes when you have no limits, to create or to design, things are harder. I think sometimes by setting parameters around design, you get more interesting things and you don't get newness for the sake of newness, which goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the difference between Copenhagen Fashion Week and other fashion weeks. It's not just about avant-garde and creating newness because we can. It's about creating things with purpose that have longevity. And I think that legacy, I really hope will stay. A conversation I was having with a lot of other people at events was about effectively cultural flattening and how Copenhagen as a week is, really fresh and there are new ideas there and it's a good place for inspiration, which it absolutely is. But when we're talking about cultural flattening, what I mean is that sometimes because of the internet, we all look the same. And it's conversations I have in my own personal life as well, that there's we're all ultimately a hive mind. We don't have original experiences anymore because we know someone else also felt that. And there is a positivity to that. There is a very, it's comforting to know that we all think and feel the same. However, it does sometimes mean that the output of what we look like and we think all feels very samey, feels very generic. And I think how that translates to trends and fashion can often feel a bit like, what's the point? So these standards to me really create a framework for people to create new ideas that have purpose, that push that cultural dialect forward. And I think the internet is going to make us all the same. We're going to continue to look more and more the same, feel the same, and feel less unique, but ultimately we are unique. Our experiences are, no two experiences are the same. And I think, wow, that's such a tangent. I'm going to wrap it up, I promise. Creating and designing with purpose helps push that cultural dialect forward. Aside from these standards, there are some brands that take it even further. Caro Editions is one of those brands that, to me, is just so fun, but its mission statement is effectively that everything they create is mostly one-off pieces from dead stock or it's like reworked vintage pieces into new ideas. And I think there's something so joyous about not only just her colorways and how she puts things together. I think the styling is very 80s, which is lovely, but I don't think there's room for that kind of creativity at many other fashion weeks, nor would it be championed. So I think that's really amazing. They, because it's all basically bespoke pieces, they are very expensive. They always have good accessories on their website though. So if you want to have a look and maybe buy something that's a bit more, at a bit more of a approachable price point, I would have a look at that. But I think all these brands individually are really trying to do their best. And I think if you're going to make new clothes, it's the only way to do it. So to wrap all that up, I think it was a really inspiring week, but the biggest takeaway for me was it's not what you have, it's what you do with it. So, you know, it's in your styling. It's how you wear something, not what you're wearing. And to me, that's something I've always believed, but to see it shown back to me in real life was comforting in a way, because I don't think I need to go out and buy new clothes all the time. You know, my body fluctuates, therefore sometimes logistically, literally I have to for size reasons, but I do think we can get inspiration from our own wardrobes, and it doesn't have to be about the latest, newest thing. And I really hope that's a trend that continues. I think there's, you know, on my way there, I was in Heathrow and there's a Chanel bag that I would love to own. Should I be spending that money on that? No. Do I want to? Yes. But I didn't buy it. I walked away and sat on it for a while. Do I still want to buy it? Yes. And that's how I always approach shopping. You know, it's not like see it, buy it, move on. It's see it, think about it, then maybe buy it. And it was nice to be a part of a week where everyone was a little bit more considered in what they were showing and what they were doing. And, you know, there's so much vintage and there were so many things I had seen other people wear before, which I really liked. So yeah, it was a privilege to go. You know, my day-to-day life is that I keep calling myself at the moment a stay-at-home mum. I am not a stay-at-home mum. I have help so that I can do some work. You know, we have childcare arrangements, etc. But my headspace is that I just am so consumed by being a parent at the moment, and I think that's just because I have a toddler. That it was the biggest privilege was to go and think deeply about something that I love. And yeah, so I'm really interested to know what you think about this kind of a different format for me. I'd love to know what you liked from the week and if anything resonated with you, or if you've tried any of these kind of styling things. It's definitely something I will be trying out on, you know, my other channels. But I think as I move further and further away from that postpartum debacle, I need to make more time to dive deeper into things, and hopefully this is something I get to do a bit more of. So yeah, let me know what you think. I am gonna go have lunch because I'm starving. I think I'm gonna do dumplings. That's all I eat every day, to be honest. Dumplings at lunchtime. And I will see you soon. Bye.